This video will be implementing the directory in the call manager. We'll try to implement it on one phone, just test it out, and then we'll implement it on the entire call manager. We don't, or at least I don't, directly point the URL to the dpd.php itself. We want to give it some things that will be configured statically in an XML document that the Cisco directory can actually read, that points to multiple directories. So we'll start out with the main.xml, and I got a copy of that. You'll have to modify it in the bundle included with DPD. And what you can do here is just define the different regiments. I'd suggest regiments to point to, and each regiment would have its own different XML file to basically begin the search within the DPD script itself. And you can also, with this main XML, point it to an off-cluster directory. And that doesn't necessarily have to be DPD, doesn't necessarily have to be an XML file or a static directory of whatsoever, or it can be some other corporate directory, whatever URL they might be using in some other cluster somewhere off in a different call manager. But how this basically works is you get to the main XML, you select which regiment you want to be looking at. It selects that XML, which is another static directory, and that basically points to DPD with the first level of search terms. Goes to the DPD with search terms, and it returns back, automatically generates this XML document here. And if you choose something that has extra spaces behind it, let's say, or more directories, essentially like ACO or BCO, it'll search DPD, or rather query DPD again with the updated search terms described here. If it doesn't have any other spaces afterwards, such as in 113th staff duty, it'll directly dial that extension, or give the user the option to dial that extension and just dial it from there. So let's go ahead and implement this. So I got my main XML here. Just for time's sake, I'm going to deviate from that previous diagram I showed you, because we don't need to get that extensive with it. But I do want to go ahead and copy this and make a pointer to 2nd Battalion, even though I don't really have any battalions other than 1st Battalion in the directory. It's just for the sake of demonstration. So I'll go ahead and put that in. I can change prompt up here if I want to. I'm going to keep it on 13th Regiment directory, and I just go ahead and save, and we'll go ahead and move this into the IIS folder, or excuse me, ww root. And when that file's in there, we're going to have to do some work in the call manager. So I'm going to go ahead and configure this on a test phone before implementing on the entire directory. And here's the little, now you don't see it, and soon you will, and it's not there, of course. And go ahead and find this phone number and edit the device itself. Two things we want to edit here. First is going to be services provisioning. We want to change it from default to both. And we also want to go down to directory and input the URL for the main.xml. Now, if it doesn't work as it's advertised here, I'll just go ahead and point out sometimes there's certain things in your call manager that don't allow non-secure directories. So in that case, I just go down to a secure directory URL and paste it in there. So that's a third option you can do if it's not working out for you with just a directory alone. Okay, so we'll go ahead and save the configuration. Apply the config. Okay. That should reset this phone, and it's reset. We'll scroll on down here and make sure that it actually worked, and there's contents after a corporate directory of the main XML. We'll go ahead and make sure this recursive lookup works out, and looks like it's working as advertised. Alright, now if I don't have any actual phones to test against, and make sure that dials, so it should come up with fast busy, as it does. So let's pretend like I've done all my testing. I know it works. I want to go ahead and implement it on the entire directory, the entire call manager. Now, if you don't want to implement it on the entire directory, all you got to do is change your phone templates and use for any new phones to have the changes we made to this one test phone. And that's what I use in my environment because I'm sharing it with other units. So I don't actually implement it on the entire directory. I just make the template for our specific phones to include this main XML file, and it just affects phones that we import and create in the directory. For those that are currently in the directory, you'll have to use bulk administration and phones and update phones, use a query, and you can actually make all these changes to all the phones within that query parameter. But I'm not going to go into how to do that with this. I'm sure you're smart enough to figure it out. I'm just going to go and implement it on the entire directory in case that's what you want to do in your environment. So to do that, I go to Device, Device Settings, Phone Services. Now I'll go click Add New. The service name I'll use in this case is going to be 13th Regiment. Now I'm going to ensure that also applies to the ASCII name. And I'll go ahead and put that URL to the main XML and service URL as well as the secure service URL. I'm going to leave it as a XML service and change this service type to directories. Click Enable and Enterprise Subscription and save. Now just test it out, make sure, because I only have one phone in my directory. I want to make sure that it works on this one phone in my directory at the moment. We'll go ahead and get rid of these parameters, change the service provisioning back to default, save and apply. Phones are resetting, and let's see if it worked. It should show 13th Regiment, and there it is. Brings up the XML. So a little bit different than when you're embedding it here. Depending on how you actually want to implement, like we talked about earlier in your environment, you may want to have the main XML point to another XML file called 13th Regiment if you want this effect, or if you just want to see 1st Battalion, 2nd Battalion directly under that root directory, you can do that too. But it appears everything's working out. And if you've made it to this point, you have successfully implemented the dynamic phone directory. And I thank you for putting up with these long monotone videos.